And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network covering IU women's basketball. I'm your host, Kathy Amos, joined here today with my partner, Jeff Marlowe. And today we are discussing Indiana's first loss of the season when they lost to the Michigan State Spartans on the road, 78-83. That takes their overall record to 12-1. And 2-1 in the conference. But let's start this way, the way we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And Jeff, I think for me, I'm going to go to close to the beginning of the fourth quarter where, we were down going into that quarter by 6, and we started making some nice plays there, I thought. So we had a really nice big defensive rebound that led to Garzon, who kicked it out to Sydney Parrish, who got it down to McKenzie for an and 2 attempt that went to a timeout. And that was the beginning or the end really of a 7-1 run when McKenzie came back in and made her free throw and tied it up 58-58. And the reason I like that as our banner moment is because I think it showed, that our team was really tough on defense with their rebounds, at least today. And they still were pushing there, even down being 6, they weren't intimidated of the moment. And they really kept battling. They just never seemed to be able to get past that hump. It seemed like to me, at least, that 5-point margin seemed to be about where Michigan State kind of hung around for most of that second half. So to me, though, I think that was great. And it also highlighted, I think, a career game that we had for McKenzie, which I'm sure we're bound to discuss later on here in our episode. So for me, that was today's banner moment. As always, our banner moment is sponsored by Home Field Apparel. Home Field is constantly releasing new schools or updating their products for schools already in their existing line. So you're bound to find something for you or as a gift for any of your friends and loved ones, even if it maybe is a belated holiday gift going away from our holiday season. But whether you want IU gear, other college teams, or really nothing associated with a team, Home Field probably has something for you. And you can go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME, HOME, to get 15% off of your entire first order. Again, that promo code is HOME, HOME, for 15% off. That website, once more, is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. All right, and now it is time for Coach's Corner, where we're going to kick it over to Jeff for his initial thoughts on the game, or really anything else that maybe is on your mind today. Jeff, what do you have for us? You're muted, by the way.
Sorry. Can I do a rant?
Please, go for it.
I when you lose your first game of the year, I don't just think it necessarily deserves a rant, but I am going to come out and say that I felt like for the most part, we got outplayed for the entire game. I felt like the focus was better by Michigan State. I felt like they played with a better sense of urgency than we did. And I'm going to go right to the thing. And to me, where this shows up is 21 turnovers. You can't, even against a mid-tier team in the Big Ten, you can't go on the road and beat them with 21 turnovers. And some of the turnovers were just lazy. They weren't focused. I don't know, a couple of them, I'm not sure where they were throwing it to, because you could see the Michigan State defender between them and the person they were trying to throw to. So to me, I'm sure the overall theme of the day outside of Mac is going to be the turnovers. But that's where I'm going to go to, because I just felt like that and you and I had texted before the game that you really felt that this was a game that was, worrying you a little bit. And I was like, well, we've, been some times we haven't played well against them, but I felt like we would be in pretty good shape, but I didn't think we'd turn it over 21 times. So I just really felt like that, to me as a coach, former coach, that's kind of a telltale sign that either, I hate to say unprepared, because I think they probably were prepared, but they weren't focused and they weren't ready. And maybe the early start at 2:00, a Central Time start, maybe got to them a little bit, but I don't have any real good answers for why we went up and turned it over 21 times. And to me, that really is where the loss is.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, Jeff. And we'll get into what went as expected and what was really kind of surprising us here in a minute. But we had a couple of career nights for sure tonight. One good and one really bad. And the 21 turnovers, and maybe career is probably not the right word, but really the season high. Our season high in turnovers came earlier in the year when we played Bowling Green, when they had 18 turnovers. So 21 was absolutely a season high. And that's right around where Michigan State definitely forces their opponents on their average for the year is 21. I just didn't expect that we would have that. We all knew, we talked about it when we previewed Michigan State, how they like to press, how they really like to turn over their opponents. So I agree with you. I don't feel like, and I even said this to my husband as we were watching the game, I didn't feel like it was Coach Morin and her staff not having the team prepared, because that was just so blatantly obvious of what Michigan State's game plan was. To me, I think it was exactly what you said and hitting the nail on the head, which was a lack of focus and a lack of execution by the majority of our team today. So I absolutely agree with 100% of what you said. But how about we go ahead and talk about what went as expected, and maybe we can find some good positives that came out of this. So Jeff, what do you have first on your list?
Well, I'm going to kind of start here. I'm going to avoid the Mackenzie Holmes subject. I think we're going to come back to her a little bit later in the show. But the sad part about this, Kathy, is as expected, we shot pretty well. This is a team that game in, game out, shoots the ball fairly well. And we shot 58.5%. We shot 58.5%, and we lost. If you would have told me we were going to go on the road and shoot 58.5%, I'd been like, give me that. That's a win. That's a win. We were only 3 for 12 on three, but again, I thought, didn't maybe shoot as many as we could have early, but again, we were turning it over. So at such a high rate with that. So, but I mean, we shot like we, to a certain degree, like we typically do. In fact, probably above our season average, but still came away with an L.
Yep. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you shoot 100% and still lose. Unfortunately. Yeah, I was really pleased, at least with our inside presence. And, I'm sure we'll get into some details of it when we get to the numbers, but, we played them even in points in the paint. And so, that was something I kind of expected. Yeah, I had the being expected as Mackenzie Holmes, and I am quite sure we'll talk about her later. So I will also not get into anything there, but yeah, you also hit the one that went as expected, which was really just good shooting. The other thing, I guess, and I sort of touched on this in my banner moment, no matter what the score was, our women didn't give up. And that is definitely still something that I've come to expect. Now, it didn't come out in their favor this time, but they were still battling with, 19 seconds to go, where they're fouling and trying to score. And, it just wasn't, they just weren't clicking on all cylinders today, and it didn't quite go their way. Any other as expected points you want to talk through?
No, I don't. I think I was about really the only one I wanted to mention at this point.
All right. Well, I'll move on to surprises. There might be a few more on that side, I think. Yeah, I think I'll just go ahead and continue talking again, because it's, I think, the theme of today, which is just the turnovers. That was just very surprising to me. Again, I knew Michigan State turned over their opponent on a fairly high basis. I just didn't expect us to fall into that trap because of how seasoned our team seems to have been for the most part. They've been really well poised in a lot of these games. The other thing that really bothered me, though, is that not only did we have the turnovers, we just seemed to let them turn it into points off of turnovers. They scored 28 points off of those turnovers to our 11 points off of the turnovers. And that to me was very surprising with that big of a margin, especially us hanging generally our defense, our hat on our defense. But what about you? What kind of surprise do you have?
Well, I'll back that up a little bit with the points off. They were plus 17, as you said, on points off turnovers. But when you're getting a lot of live ball turnovers like we did today, it's going to lead to that. The defense has a harder time matching up in the transition. And we really struggled in the first half. I thought with matching up and having a good idea of what we're going to do with the McDaniel girl, as I really thought she kind of got them going in the first half, and in the second half, the others really started to chip in as well. For me, I'm going to talk about Sarah Scalia right here. Sarah Scalia, in the first half, 0 points, 4 turnovers, was struggling a little bit on the defensive end as well. And then the second half really did not play a whole lot better. She ended up with 4 points. but she and 1 assist. But she also she at least she cut down the turnovers. She only had 5. But this is the 3rd or 4th straight game now where we've really had to talk about Sarah Scalia really not bringing what she, her role coming in was, which was to be primarily a 3-point shooter, scorer, and she's really struggled. And so that to me is a surprise, and it also may be a kind of a preview of a lingering question that we need to talk a little bit about. But I just really feel like not only did Sarah kind of, and she's not the only one, by the way. I don't want anybody to think I'm just pointing at her, because there was a lot of people today who did not pull weight. But this has been more. This has been more than a 1-game trip to East Lansing where Sarah has really struggled.
Yeah, I agree. I had Sarah written down as my surprise, one of my surprises as well. Even though you and I have talked about this in the past couple of shows, we started, especially in the last one, really starting to talk about how it seems Sarah's been off. She doesn't seem to have her confidence on the shooting side. Today, what I also saw, I just felt like she got beat a lot on the defensive side too. And so now it feels like whatever is going on with her, mentally or whatever is going on in her life, perhaps it's affecting her. Because again, we have to remember, they're human as well. We don't know a tenth of what's going on in their lives. So, we're not here to judge them in terms of that type of things going on, but it is interesting. And I hope that whatever it is, the coaching staff can help her work through it, because it seems like now Sarah is being affected on both sides of the ball. And yes, to your point though, it wasn't just Sarah that we need to point to, to get to 21 turnovers with only 1 player not contributing or contributing too much in that perspective. I think for me, I'll continue on with one other surprise. And I was actually kind of surprised at our defensive effort today. I thought McDaniels in particular, who I know is their leading scorer going in, she averages 14 points a game, that we ended up allowing her to score 24 in this game. Is 13 in the first half and then another 11 in that second half. And it just didn't seem like we had any answer for stopping her on that curl around that free throw line and then driving the ball in on us. And I was a little surprised at that, but then as well, allowing, as many points. Now, again, I understand, they had 83 points and quite a few of those came at the end when we were fouling them. Totally understand that. But, that's right around Michigan State's average. And, for the most part, I don't think we've been allowing many teams to score near their team average. So I was a little surprised at our team defensive effort today. But what are your thoughts on our defense today?
It wasn't a good defensive effort. I mean, and I kind of will go back to one that you pointed out to me that's a surprise, because I don't think it's a positive, and that's the fact that we allowed them to have 48 points in the paint. And I would have thought that would have been an area that we would have had an edge without Mackenzie Holmes. Even I just felt like we would have had an edge on that in that part of the game. And so to be even on points in the paint, that tells you a little bit about the defense. We allowed way too much of McDaniel and others to get into the lane and where they were able to knock down shots. And it just seemed like the other thing too, I think what we've come, Kathy, over the year, plus we've done this show and over the last 2-3 years of us watching this team that, or this program, that we just kind of like, okay, don't make their move. And you felt like when it got back to 58, 60 in the fourth quarter, it's like, okay, they're going to figure out a way to get over the hump and win this one. But every time Michigan State had an answer, and kudos to them. And I really felt like maybe the big play was the 3-pointer in the corner, because that took it back from a 4-point game back out to 7, and time was, and with the foul. But that it just was, time was becoming of the essence a little bit there as well. But so those, again, I just was not a good day for them. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about some, and things and lingering questions, I'm sure, but we just really we've got to do a little better job of matching up defensively and just getting down and moving. And defense is primarily not necessarily always about talent. It's about desire and hustle. And you can overcome some of that if you are locked into what your game plan is, what the scouting report is. And that's what I just felt like we lost focus. We just didn't have focus today, at least the focus we're used to.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any other surprises on your list?
No, that was about it for me.
Okay. The only other one I thought maybe we could talk through was Chloe Moore McNeil. I was a little surprised. She also got bit by that turnover bug, and we haven't really seen that from her. And, she had 4 today. And that's one thing I thought in particular, this game, it leads me into another thought. And you tell me if you agree. Outside of the Illinois game, I think this really is a game Grace's not being with us was really felt, and Chloe really seemed to get sped up, and she had some of those turnover bugs bite her as well, where we haven't seen that from Chloe. I felt that for the most part she's been stepping into that point guard role pretty well until this game in particular. But what are your thoughts on Chloe and or Grace's absence?
Well, you and I agree a little bit about on the absence of Grace, but we're not getting her probably back any time in the next week or so. So if we do get her back, it's probably going to be mid-January, the end of January. But the other part about that is, even though it wasn't a conference game, the last game we played, Chloe struggled with the turnover bug a little bit. She had come into that game, I think, with 10 or 11 for the year and had 3 or 4 in that game. Now she ends up with 4 in this game. And I thought you're right. I thought it was, sped up a little bit. And I think that that's also one of those things where, as you talk about, she's not a natural point guard. She's being asked to run a role that she's not natural at, and she's done pretty well at overall. I thought one of the telltale signs there today was Michigan State got a 10-second count on us in the second half when we didn't get the ball across the timeline. And there's somebody on the floor who needs to take charge and be able to get that and not let that happen. And that was missing today. And obviously Grace was going to be that person that we were going to count on to make plays, to get people in the right place. But if and when she does come back, this team may be, at least have a little better identity of who they are and what they can do when they have to be asked to step into different roles. But right now, I say I'm not trying to get overly worked up about one loss, but I'm just sure this is a game that we all kind of thought on paper at the beginning of the season that we were going to go up to East Lansing and win.
Right. Absolutely agree. We didn't expect them to go undefeated for the whole year. So we knew this was coming. Same. I didn't quite expect it. All right. Well, how about we go ahead and jump into the numbers? I know we've been talking about them intermittently here, but let's really dive into them. So do you want to start us off, Jeff? Do you want to go team or individual? I'll let you pick whatever you really want to talk about. Wait, turnovers? Is that a issue today?
Yeah. Turnovers. And again, we had our 3 primary ball handlers had 13 turnovers between them. Chloe, Yarden, and Sarah Scalia had 13. Had 13 turnovers between them, and so that's that to me was and Yarden's a freshman, I get that, but she can't have 5 turnovers along with the 17 points. She's got to do a better job of being able to take care of the ball, and especially with this group right now, because she may be the one that really could be, in Grace's absence, could be somebody that can move the ball a little bit more and take some of that load off of a Chloe Moore McNeil. And I think that really would help overall. The other thing too, I think also I'm going to point out here, Kathy, is I'm going to piggyback off of that is something you talked a little bit about earlier, just in terms of numbers, is that they outscored us 20-4 from the bench. The bench play was we got really nothing from the bench today, obviously, but we didn't use the bench in the second half. And Hannah Sandvik played quite a bit in the first half. Alyssa Geary played quite a bit in the first half. We saw Alexis Bargesser in the first half. We saw very little of them in the second half. And I just kind of like where Coach Moore wanted to kind of go back to the kind of the 5 or 6 that she trusts. But in a game like this, I think you have to be able to have a little more depth and be able to, because you didn't have anything working. There was no combination, in my opinion. There was no combination that was working that you're like, I'm going to stay with that group. And so you just kind of keep trying to find a combination that is working. And that's where I think you got to keep kind of moving people in and out until you find one that does click, because they didn't find it today.
Yeah, I agree, Jeff. So, so you mentioned we actually had 14 turnovers because Chloe got contributed another one late there in the game. But we to your point, Sandvik had 5 minutes, Geary had 4. And then I looked up in the second half, Geary didn't play at all, and Sandvik played less than 1 minute. So really just the only person in that bench play that came in off of the bench was Bargesser in that second half. And so I agree. I think that was, it's something it just seems to have been the last few seasons in particular, we've really been talking about it, and it reared its head on us again. In terms of an overall team number, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit, and we've mentioned it a little, is the 3-point shooting. I just thought the volume at 3-point shots at only 12, and then only making 3 of those 12 for 25% just was, not something that we need to have on the road. I think 12 points or 12 field goals attempts even just really didn't quite open things up. Although, Mackenzie was doing a really fantastic job, which I'm sure in the next segment we'll get into Mackenzie more. I just think that 12 field goals, 3-point field goals was probably not quite enough for this team to take. But what are your thoughts on that number?
Well, I mentioned earlier, I would like to. I think that number needs to be up closer to 18 or 20 for the game. Again, Yarden Garzon is shooting over 50% from beyond the arc, and she only shot 4. And a couple of those came late. One that she hit, and one that I think, airballed or barely grazed the rim on. So why isn't she looking for a little bit more of that? And that's not on the coaching staff. To me, that's on the player. That should be able to come out of the flow a little better for the player to find that as well. And so I thought that I didn't think 12 was enough, but 3 for 12 is obviously not a good number either. But it's almost like they kind of reverted back. And again, in some of the losses we've talked about in the year plus that we've done doing the work, Kathy, it's kind of where we get to where they don't shoot very many threes. They're not shooting a good percentage on the threes that they are shooting. They don't shoot very many. And they kind of get where they're almost a mid-range team, except for Mackenzie. And I thought that kind of showed up today as well.
Yeah, I agree. What other stats do you want to talk about today in terms of the numbers?
Well, let's put it, you brought up Lexi. We talked about Lexi Bargesser a little bit. 15 minutes, 4 points. In fact, she had the only 4 points off the bench. And again, plus minus is sometimes a flawed stat, but she was plus 3 on a team that didn't have very many people who were plus today, obviously. But Lexi Bargesser in 15 minutes was a plus 3. She only had 1 turnover. She had a steal. She had a block. So, I think she's showing that she continues to be earning minutes and to get more minutes.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I thought Lexi was really good. Only 1 turnover for her. So she was definitely on the low end of those that had double-digit minutes for us today. So the other thing I just want to make sure we point out, is that we did have 4 players in double figures. So we had Garzon, Chloe Moore McNeil, Sydney Parrish, and Mackenzie all scored double digits. So, again, it would, to your point, 58% field goal percentage and putting up 78 points absolutely really wasn't the problem. The problem, again, in my opinion, there were 2 main things: keeping a hold of the ball, turnovers, and then allowing points off of them, as well as our defense. But the only other thing I think, yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say that though, but 2 of those were relatively late to double figures. I mean, they came in as we were trying to, score and foul. So for most of the game, we had 1 person in double figures, Mackenzie Holmes, and then Yarden got going in the 4th quarter and got into double figures. So, but it really was. There was not much help on the offensive end. If you want to kind of bridge this in with surprises, the fact that there wasn't a lot of offensive balance today. I know it looks like it showed up that way, but there really was not much offensive balance if you watch the game through the first 3.5 quarters.
Yep. That's exactly where I was going. But most of it came in that 4th quarter. That's all right. It's nice if we're making the same point. So it's good. Yeah. And we already touched on all the 3-point shooting. The other thing back to defensive, and we've, probably have hammered this nail in enough, but I think if I remember with my memory here, that Michigan State usually only has McDaniels and Eck averaging in double figures, and they had 4 today. So I think that was also just something that kind of backs up our feeling, if you will, that visceral feeling of our defense just wasn't on point to where we normally see it. Any other numbers you want to talk about in this segment?
I will say this from a positive standpoint. They went to the free throw line. They were 13 of 17, so 76.5%. Again, this is a team that in the past, when they have struggled with the free throw line, that's been another thing that's kind of come back to bite them in games like this one today. That wasn't the case. They hit their free throws when they got to the line for the most part.
Yeah. Absolutely. Didn't seem like we had as many assists. Chloe had 7, which was fantastic, and Garzon had 6. But outside of that, we only had 6 other assists from the rest of the team. So I didn't feel like they were quite sharing the ball as much as we've seen them earlier in the season as well.
And for a team that was, for a team that was one of the best in the country at assist to turnover ratio, they were negative to or below 1-1. They had 19 assists to 21 turnovers. So that tells you a little bit about how the game was going.
Yep. Great.
Or a lot about how the game was going.
Yes, I agree. Okay. Anything else inside the numbers?
I think those are the numbers I wanted to talk about, Kathy.
Same for me. Yep. Same for me. Great. All right. Well, with that kickoff from Bob Thompson, we'll transition into the game ball. I think this one will go pretty quickly and pretty unanimous, but we'll make it official here. And you can see on the bottom of the screen, Jeff has got it scrolling up if you're watching on YouTube. Holmes is right now got 7 game balls, Sydney Parrish 2, Garzon 2, and Grace Berger with 1. But Jeff, who's your game ball winner today?
Well, shocker that I'm going to go with the kid that scored a ton and had a double-double. Mackenzie Holmes, 32 points, a career high, 32 points, 12 of 17, which, again, is part of the reason maybe you weren't shooting so many threes. Mac was 12 for 17. 8 of 10 at the line, 12 rebounds, and she had 1 block and 1 steal. So Mackenzie Holmes for me for the game ball.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty no-brainer. Not only did she have a career high in points, she also had her 12 rebounds with the double-double. In fact, I'm pretty sure I looked at Sean, my husband, at around halftime, and I said, you know what? Mackenzie's going to mess around here and get another double-double. And sure enough, there she goes. And this is her 4th double-double of the year. The other thing, and we've talked about the last couple of episodes on talking about some of the games earlier on, she seemed to have what I like calling happy feet, where she'd catch that ball and kind of shuffle her feet. And I thought she had really fantastic footwork today as well. She had 2 turnovers, but I don't think, she had 2 turnovers. I don't think either one of those were from travels that we had seen earlier in the year. So this was definitely an easy game ball to pick out, in my opinion, as well. So that takes her up to 8 now. So congratulations to Mackenzie. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and move on to the Hoosier Hustle Award. Again, you can see that scrolling at the bottom of the YouTube screen if you're watching on YouTube. But Chloe Moore McNeil right now and Sydney Parrish both have 3.5 game balls leading us. And then Berger, Caitlin Peterson, Alyssa Gary, Meister, and Bargesser all have 1. So, that's kind of neat, looking back at that as the season has progressed. It talks a lot about how when we've needed different players to step up, we have. But what are you thinking today for Hoosier Hustle Award? It's a little harder, I think.
Yeah, it is a little harder. And this is one that I'm probably violating a little bit of my own moral, or my own principle here a little bit, but I'm going to go with Yarden Garzon here for the Hustle Award. The 17 points. She did have 3 rebounds. She had 6 assists. She had 2 blocks. Obviously, the big glaring negative for her was the 5 turnovers that they had her for officially on the Michigan State website. So, but I'm going to go with Yarden because at least, for most of the game, she was giving some help to Mac, and I just felt like this is almost one of those, Kathy. I'm like, do we really need a Hustle Award today? But I'm going to go with Yarden.
Yeah, I think so too, Jeff. I mean, it was hard, especially, it's a good thing they play a full game, because if you would have asked me at halftime, I don't think I would have been able to pick anyone outside of Mackenzie I felt was playing very well. I think Chloe Moore McNeil really, calmed down some in the second half, still with 4 turnovers, not what we need. Again, I get it. She's not meant to have been our point guard coming into the season, but that's where she is right now. And if you're going to play 39 minutes for us, I'm hoping we can, cut back on the turnovers. I thought Sydney Parrish was okay. She ended up with 10 points, but she ended up with 5 fouls and really kind of fouled out at a point in time where I really felt the team needed her to be out there on the floor. She was somebody that could be a 3-point threat. So, it kind of fell short for me with Sydney as well. So I actually landed on Garzon as well when I was writing down my notes. So we'll make it unanimous with that. I thought that 4th quarter in particular, Garzon really stepped up. It seemed like the team was starting to target her more, and she ended up with 17 points. And in terms of the turnover, she did have 5, but, so did, 5 from Sarah and 4 from Chloe as well. 4 of those came in the first half. So at least, she seemed to have cleaned it up in that second half. The other thing I liked about Garzon today is something, we were talking about very early on in the season, which is the opposite of what we saw from Sydney today, is her propensity to foul. And today, again, she ended up with only 3 fouls, which I think, again, is just a good testament to somebody who's so young coming in and really learning to play college basketball over here in the States, So I liked her game in that second half in particular, so she came up, with a 3-pointer there in that second half. So for me, yeah, Garzon will get that game ball as well. So that is, I believe, her first Hoosier Hustle Award for the season. So, Jeff, I think with that, we are going to go ahead and transition a little bit into lingering questions. So our first road game, or excuse me, our first loss of the season, of course, is going to probably put a whole lot of questions for us. But what's your first one?
Well, I know Ari's been pointing out here in the Chataholics, or with the Workaholics, I should say. The Workaholics are that he was watching Coach Morin's post game, and she talked about the turnovers and that they got to get that fixed. And I think they will to a certain degree, but it is a little bit of an issue until they get it figured out. It's a lingering question of, can they overcome the number of turnovers that they're right now having a propensity for, and still win against some of the better teams they're going to see. Nebraska on Sunday is not going to be an easy game. Northwestern, again, it's a Big Ten game. Until you go out there and show that you're going to beat them, I'm never counting. I don't try to get too, that's a definite 100% win. But then also they got Maryland coming up. And so you got to get the turnovers at least under control a little bit. I know you're not having the kid that you thought was the player that you thought was going to be your primary ball handler, the kid who was going to be making the best decisions, but you can't have 21 turnovers. You can't have the 18 or 17 that we had the other day, last week when we played, was it Moorhead? Bowling Green. Yeah. And so you just that to me is the lingering question. Can we get the turnovers under control enough to where now you have another 7-8 possessions when you're shooting above 50% that you're going to score on?
Yeah, I agree. That's obviously the number one question, because again, this wasn't like this was the first time we've seen this from the team. You mentioned Bowling Green. I don't remember which other game, but there was a game before Bowling Green. We kind of talked about the turnovers kind of getting a little out of control as well. And it seems to come from kind of a bunch of players, like just a few rather, 2 or 3. And it seems like 2 or 3 of them get the turnover bug. We had that earlier with Mackenzie where she, had 5 or 6 in a couple of games in a row, and then she's fixed it. Garzon fixed her foul problem. Now she's turning the ball over. Scalia's now gotten into her, mentally in her head, can't shoot, and she's turning the ball over. And that travel late in the game that was just so.
Of course, not that we saw it live because BTN Plus was running a replay.
That camera work was neat. But yes, we won't talk about Big Ten Plus and their stellar, as always, production level. But anyway, yes, I agree with that lingering question. The other one is to kind of go into Sarah Scalia some more. Like, can she fix what's going on mentally? Because we need her. She clearly can shoot the ball, and she just needs to remember that she can shoot the ball, and that she's really actually a good all-around player, and that she didn't come down here solely to shoot 3-pointers. And I know that's why she was mainly brought in, is to help bolster our 3-point shooting. But Coach Morin has been very public about saying that she does not recruit any players, freshmen or transfers, to come to Indiana without them knowing and understanding that defense is our number one priority. And I know Sarah knows that, and we knew that was going to be a stretch for her. But if, that's what's causing her to get a little, out of her confidence, because she's now more focused on defense and it's making her distracted from the offensive end, I'm not sure. One thing I believe that the coaching staff can help her through that. So that's my one of my big lingering questions is, can Sarah get out of whatever funk she's had? Because without Grace in particular, we are not a deep enough team that we can afford to lose somebody again, even though this time is to injury. But What else do you have?
Well, I'm going to extend off that. And again, with one loss, you may not see it, but with the way she's played over the last 3, 4, if you really mind, maybe even stretch out to 5 games now, do you put Alexi Bargesser in the lineup and let Sarah come off the bench and maybe kind of watch the game in front of her? I'm not looking at it as like a demotion and a doghouse type situation, but sometimes a player who's struggling with confidence, and according to Coach Moore in the post game, she even had flat out said that, according to Ari's comments in the Workaholics, that Sarah has lost some confidence, and so in her and stuff. So sometimes you get a little better feeling of the game as you kind of watch it for 2, 3 minutes in a college game, I would assume, and maybe 3, 4 minutes, and then you come in and you don't feel like it's all on you as part of that starting unit. So that'll be one of the things I'll be interested to see. And I doubt that she does, because we know Coach Moore is pretty loyal to the group that she has in terms of whoever her starters have been over the years. We've rarely seen her just change a lineup for a change sake. It's been because somebody's hurt, sick, whatever. So I really would be surprised if she does, but it would be something that I would be interested to see and say, give Lexi Bargesser another few minutes and let Sarah, at least for a game or two, come off the bench and kind of get a flow going off the bench and see if she can bring something from the bench. As we mentioned, we only got 4 points off the bench. All right. So maybe she could come in off the bench and now she scores 10, 12, 15 points and our bench production looks a whole lot better. So but that would be a part of that. That would be one of my things with that as well.
Yeah, I agree. And you tell me if this is wrong, but if you have a player that is having a confidence problem, as it seems that Sarah is, I don't know that the answer is then to take her out of the starting lineup. That to me might feel it actually might hurt more than it helps. It maybe not, maybe, it depends on the player and how they respond. And, maybe they respond to that kind of, move. But I wonder about that. Again, I'm not coach, but what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that would potentially make things worse, or is it really more player dependent on how they handle this situation?
Well, 2 things, actually, maybe 3 things. One, it's player dependent in terms of you got to know your team, got to know your players, but it also goes just to your philosophy. I mean, like when I was coaching, my players knew that I was going to change lineups if I felt like we needed to do something, whether it was just juggling the lineup, whether I was unhappy with the way somebody was playing. And then the third thing here, you kind of go along with that, is that you just got to, besides knowing your team, sometimes you do it to give them a little jump start. It's like, Bob Knight once said, bench is the greatest motivator in the world. And sometimes you can, the flip side of that is sometimes your starters get comfortable because they're like, I'm going to start because coach is going to stick with the lineup. So again, it's really dependent on knowing your team and knowing your players, and you have to have those conversations. But I think the other thing that will help her immensely, she just has to, and you can only really get your confidence back on your own. Now, I'm one who thinks do believe coaches can give some confidence, but that's, they're working with them. They keep telling her, hey, when you're open, shoot it. But she's got to get in the gym, and I'm sure she is, but she's got to get in the cook hall. She's got to get in there and get shots up. The only way you get your confidence back is to keep shooting and keep playing. But she's got to get right now, as we've talked about, focus was an issue today for all of them for the most part. NACA maybe didn't have that problem, but the focus part just really was lacking on the team today.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have any other lingering questions to talk about. How about you?
I don't either.
All right. Anything else in general about this game before we, call it done and dusted, and we'll move on to the next?
Done, dusted, as you said, and we'll get ready for the next one. And we always used to talk about you can't let it and kind of linger. Use that to segue. Can't let it linger. You can't let this one affect your next one. You got to put it away. You got to put it in the rearview mirror. You got to put it, you learn from it, but you got to forget it too and move on to Sunday and get ready for Nebraska.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the coaching staff's philosophy, at least that we've heard, is you get 24 hours. You get 24 hours to be excited about the win, 24 hours to be mad and pissed off about the loss. And after that, you know what? It's in the banks. Let's learn from it and move on. So, well, with that, let's go ahead and preview our next opponent, which is Nebraska at home. So, Jeff, I'll kick it off here a little bit with just some of the history that we have with Nebraska, and then I'll turn it over to you to kind of jump into some more specifics. So, just real quick, IU is 10-6. right now against Nebraska. So that game is going to be in Bloomington, and they are 6-2. Indiana is 6-2 in Bloomington. Last year, we split our games with Nebraska, so each team won respectively their home game. And then real quick on Nebraska, they are currently 10-4 overall and 2-1 the Big Ten. They just lost last night to Michigan at home, 76-59. Their 2 conference wins are over Maryland on the road at Maryland, 90-67. And then they won at home against Wisconsin, 82-54. So Jeff, what do you want to talk to us about with Nebraska?
Well, and before last night, the Cornhuskers were averaging 74 points a game while holding their opponents to 60 a game. So they were +5 in rebounding. They aren't shooting it as well as you might think for a team that's 10-4. They're only shooting 43% from the field, 36% from three, though, probably makes up for some of that. They're holding opponents to 36% from the field and 32% on threes, forcing, and this may be one of the huge keys on Sunday, they're forcing 16 turnovers a game, but they commit 15 turnovers a game. So that'll be interesting to see. Jazz Shelley leads them with 15.5 points a game. Alexis Markowski at 6'3" senior, 6'3" center, chips in 13.6. So they have 2 other players averaging double figures as well. Markowski leads the team in rebounds at just under 10 at 9.8 and just over a block. The interesting one here, Kathy, I want to kind of get your thoughts, is we thought that Sam Habe, their 4th leading scorer from last year and somebody who gave us fits last year, was expected to be out the season with an injury, has now come back and is playing big brace, but she's played 3 games. She's averaged about 13 minutes a game. And I imagine that's what we'll see Sundays around that same number, maybe 15, 16. They might get it up a little bit, averaging about 5 points a game for Coach Amy Williams in her 7th season. But what do you make of Habe coming back?
Yeah, I was really surprised when I think Ari had kind of told us about that. I hadn't realized she was back, and I honestly I wasn't looking for her to come back, because that's what Nebraska actually came out and it said, was that she was not going to be playing this year. So not only to see her playing again, but to see her playing in December was really surprising to me. So I wonder if that, hopefully, good for her. That means maybe her injury wasn't quite as bad and it didn't warrant surgery. So I was just really surprised to hear that she's back. So it'll be really interesting. I don't know for the game on Sunday that we'll see, as you mentioned, much more of her. But I wonder as the year goes on, if she's able to continue rehabbing and fixing her knee with whatever injury she had, if we start seeing that become more of a contributing factor for Nebraska as they move deeper into the season. So that's something to watch, not so much, I think, for our game Sunday, but more of a big season. How does that impact Nebraska the rest of the year?
And a really good point. And let's face it, you mentioned in the first part of the preview, they have one of the best wins of the Big Ten so far when they went to Maryland and just destroyed them. Beat them by 20. And it really, to a certain degree, wasn't that close. They really were in control of that game pretty much from tip to end. But then they turn around and pretty much get handled last night at home by Michigan, who, again, maybe Michigan's a little bit better than we thought they were going to be. I mean, they right now are undefeated in the league. And so, maybe we underestimated them a little bit. But this is a team that we struggled with a little bit last year. And part of that was because their post players really hurt us. So I think that'll be interesting to see how we do Sunday against Nebraska and some of their post players. Now, Habe being hurt will definitely make a little bit of a difference. But last year, Habe, Markowski, we really struggled with them.
Yeah, so I think, to your point, I think the turnovers is something, back to our lingering question. Is this going to become a theme for our team, or can, the coaching staff help the players reel that in? Because you're going up against now another team who forces a large number of turnovers at 16. Hopefully we can get back down to our closer, at least average or goal that we have, the 12 turnovers. But I think that turnover margin and not just the turnovers, but how many points it leads to for both teams, the points off a turnover margin, I think is going to be really key, in my opinion, for this game. And can we get our 3-point shooting and, back to where it is? Keeping the team down to 36% as Nebraska does might not be the best team to be able to do that in, but at least we're going to be at home. So hopefully we're a little more comfortable. So can we use this, as Quang is saying, it sucks we lost, but can we use this to motivate us? We knew we weren't going to go undefeated all year. So hopefully this will give them a lot of good film to look on things that they can clean up.
And one thing we'll mention here that game on Sunday is 1:00 Eastern, 12 Central, and that game is on ESPN, so everybody can watch that game if they want to instead of having to have a BTN Plus subscription. But let's also bring in here real quick, Kathy. We haven't talked a lot about the league, but it was reported last night that the green girl from Ohio State looks like she's out for the rest of the season. Yeah. JC Sheldon has been out with a lower leg injury that they are describing as week to week. So there's others in the league who are battling through some injuries at top of the league, like Indiana is with Grace Berger. And I think that'll be an interesting kind of lingering question preview type thing. That to me will be an interesting to see how this plays out over the course of the Big Ten season, is how those teams are able to make adjustments, and can they stay where we think they'll be in the top of the league race with some of these injuries they're dealing with.
Yeah, I agree. And, I watched a little bit of the Ohio State game last night. They didn't miss, either of their players right now, but they're also playing Northwestern. So not real surprising. So I think it'll be something to watch with Ohio State as they start getting into some more of that, top 5-6 teams in the league. If they're still out with Sheldon and now Green for the year, if they're out with them, how can will they be deep enough? It feels like, they're still going to be okay, but that could really impact their standing as well. And there's always injuries, and especially as we keep moving forward here with the heart of conference play, I think that's definitely something to watch for all of our teams, which is probably still our lingering question we didn't talk about, is just exactly when Grace is going to come back. We're hearing positive things about it, but hopefully, we can get her back in time, that we can get her back into the lineup. The team used to playing with her, hopefully in that February gauntlet before we get into tournament play.
I agree.
So, Jeff, anything else you want to talk about? Again, that game is in Bloomington against Nebraska. It's on Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern, 12 Central on ESPN. But anything else you want to talk about with Nebraska, or anything about today's game?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Well, we'll just get some good programming notes, and then we'll go to last call. But just as a reminder, Jeff is keeping us up to date about all of our Hoosier alums that are playing in the pros. He does this in both our private community as well as our Twitter feed for Doing the Work. And if you haven't already, we'd love for you to follow us at Doing the Work. Jeff was also out there tweeting during the game and giving us some nice insights from his perspective. You can find us by just searching for Doing the Work with spaces in between on Twitter and find us there. Assembly Call Radio on the men's side will have their normal Thursday night show later tonight. So be sure to come back if you can at 9 Eastern for that show. And if you don't already as well, Crimson Cast is part of our Back Home network. You can subscribe to their podcast that they put out periodically as well. As for Jeff and I, we will be back with you on Sunday at on Sunday the 1st, right after that Nebraska game. We will plan on going live immediately following the game. So that will probably be approximately at 3 Eastern and 2 Central. And again, we'll be going live right after that game. So just pay attention on Twitter and we'll help guide you along. All right, Jeff, what is on your mind here for last call as we wrap things up for today?
Well, I think it's something we've talked about throughout the broadcast, the podcast. Kathy and Quang brought it up in the Workaholics. We got to use this as a motivator. You got to be mad that you lost to a team that probably, at least on paper, you should have beat. Again, on the road, in the league, nothing easy. But I think you got to try and use it as a motivator and say, you know what, this one really stung a little bit. Let's get back and take our frustrations out on Nebraska on Sunday and really kind of get refocused. Now, they won't have much time. And traditionally, as you talk about with Coach Moore in their 24 hours, they generally don't practice on the floor the day after a game. Of course, they'll be traveling back sometime this evening as well, but they generally, at least a kind of rule of thumb, is they don't get on the floor the day after a game, at least in a competitive practice type. They may get some shots up, and I'm sure the players will go in on their own and get some shots up and things, work on some things. So basically, you're going to get 1 day of practice to get ready for Nebraska. But you got to start fixing some things, and the coaches are going to be trying to fix it. But the players also have to just have the mindset that I'm not turning it over 5 times. I'm not turning it over 4 times. We're going to take care of the ball better. It's just a collective mindset. of the players that, to me, that's the big thing there. And then your offense is probably still going to flow as well as it has. As right now, you're hurting yourselves with all the turnovers.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, Jeff. I think, again, we weren't expecting him to go undefeated. I was hoping it wouldn't quite come here yet in 2022 before we lost our first game, but I'm not completely surprised. As I texted you and Ari before the game, I said, I just didn't have a good feeling about this game. No specific reason or inside knowledge as to why it might be. I certainly didn't have any great premonitions as I slept last night about 21 turnovers, but it is, to your point, it's going to happen. And the best thing you can do from this is go back, learn from it, and clean it up. So I think we'll see that from our team. I think we have a really great coaching staff, and I think we have some players that have a great basketball IQ and great mentality. And I just don't see it from them. They have high and lofty goals for this year. I think they're going to be highly motivated on Sunday. So, Jeff, I think with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So thanks to everybody that joined us here this afternoon, evening, and listening to us and watching on YouTube Live. And if you also want to see us do the show live and be part of our chat, please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find that at youtube.com/assemblycall. If you'd also like to be part of our private community, we would love to have everyone there. We talk about all kinds of Indiana sports, not just men's basketball or women's basketball, but we have some other good conversations around other sports as well. You can join today at join.assemblycall.com. A huge thanks to John Ringer of Riggs Design for designing our logo that you have. We have a new one there up in the right-hand corner. We rotate a few of them. And a huge thanks to Bob Thompson for our new music. You heard that a few times throughout our show today, so we enjoy it. And most of all, thank you all for listening. And we'll be back with you next year. Happy holidays and a happy new year to everyone. But we'll be back with you again on Sunday to talk IU hoops. Until then, keep your elbows in, your eyes on the rim, and let's go Hoosiers.
All right, we're done. Yeah, we're out of here. We need one of those little cameos, like, it's like Ryan. That's it. I'm out of here.
I know.
Yeah. So
thanks to everyone who was here. I know, people still have to work and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure it wasn't all easy for a lot of people to get on and watch the game at that kind of a tip time on an afternoon. So happy that our game's not going to be on Big Ten Plus again. I will live with commercials if I can actually see the whole game, which will be really a neat thing.
Was this our last one on B10 Plus?
I don't have my schedule with me, but has the TV schedule on it. It has to be one of the last remaining ones. So yeah, I don't have it. I'm sure Ari knows if he's still listening off the top of his head, but
that's fine.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk next year though.
Thanks everybody. We'll talk on Sunday, January 1st.